Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to our webinar about price sensitivity and more specifically about leveraging price sensitivity analysis for sustainable growth. I'm doing this webinar together with my colleague Arjan, and I'm Customer Success Manager. Arjan is co-founder, but he will tell a bit more about that later on. Goal for today actually is to give you some information about how the price sensitivity model works. What do we understand about price sensitivity? And we want to show you how we apply it, but also the lessons learned, and hopefully we can enrich you with some information, maybe to do it yourself or with our help to use price elasticity and sensitivity in your pricing. So, price sensitivity. In order for us to determine price sensitivity, we are looking at what are price drivers and how do you define them. So, this scenario, think about me as a customer. I'm walking into a supermarket and I want to buy this nice looking, good looking bottle of beer from Heineken. And then you can say, okay, let me see what is now actually the part that is, decides my willingness to pay for this bottle. So we will do a brainstorming, and this could be for any product, but just to bring you along in how this works, we do an example and we start with a bottle of beer, in this case Heineken. So let's go to the first one, brand value. So if I'm in the supermarket, do I want to buy Heineken? Am I willing to pay more for Heineken instead of Warsteiner or Hertog Jan or another beer? So brand value gives a perception on my willingness to pay, drives the price for a beer. Another one, for example, is the competitors that are offering it. So you can think of if I am at the beer part of the supermarket, right? There are all these different kinds of beers sorted out, and I need to determine how many competitors are there. Is there just can I only get Heineken, or are there more that I can get? So the competitive field also has a clear definition, has a clear impact on my willingness to pay for that specific beer. Another one, of course, is quality. So, Heineken, some will discuss this, but it's a premium Pilsner. So people will say, okay, there is a certain premium to it compared, for example, to Schultenbrouw or another beer. People are willing to pay for quality. So the quality of your product definitely also has an impact on the willingness to pay and the driver for price for a specific product. Life cycle stage. Okay, so this is an interesting one as well. Specifically, if you're more in the retail sector, for example, or in fashion, this is a thing as well. If you're looking into Heineken, just the beer itself, there is a product life cycle, of course, for all the products. And the bottle of Heineken is already in a very mature stage, right? So they've already have the market share. There are a lot of competitors working for the same product. But now, if you go into a new product, if you launch a new product, it's very much at the beginning. So there are not many competitors. It's the beginning. It's new. People are maybe willing to pay more or less depending on the product you're offering. So definitely, this is one of the drivers of your price. Another thing is the price level. So how expensive is a product, right? Are we talking about cents, euros, tens of euros, hundreds of euros, thousands of euros? So depending in which price level my product is, it determines a bit about the sensitivity. Another thing is frequency of buying. So if let's say I'm a daily user of this beer and every single day I'm going to the supermarket, that means I'm buying it fairly often, right? So then I have a better understanding on what does this product actually costs on a day-to-day basis instead of that I would buy it when there's just a birthday or my family-in-law is coming in. So the frequency of buying also helps in determining what is the willingness to pay, what's the price sensitivity with regards to this specific product. So the location, of course. So where do you offer your product? So think about, is it in a web shop? Is it in the store? So for example, if you look at this specific bottle of beer, am I buying it in the supermarket? Am I buying it at a bar? Am I buying it at a festival? Maybe at a concert? It all determines, of course, how much you can play around with the price. And also, of course, are there any other alternatives? Are there at some place products that you feel like, okay, Can I swap them around? Is there something that's pretty similar to it? Maybe I want to go to it for 0.0 or, all these kind of things. Then we also, of course, have the packaging. Maybe you still remember it, but Heineken used to be, of course, a brown bottle. Later on, it became green. But also for packaging, we also think about there are great examples for it. But you can buy a single bottle. You can buy the bottle per four, per six, or per crate. It all depends based upon what my needs are, but also what's my willingness to pay with regards to this. So the price sensitivity differentiates, changes over time depending on what the packaging is I'm looking for. So the exercise, what we now just basically did together, this is something we would do with your full team to see for your products what are the main drivers to identify them. Once we've identified them, we actually go into the next step, which is a conceptual model. And for a conceptual model, we look into what are all the relations between all the different drivers and what's the impact they have all together. So we map them out as you see down here. And you could think, for example, very specifically also about the correlation. So there is a correlation most of the time between life cycle and competitive field. So if it's a new product, you're launching a new product, there are not that many competitors. But if you're launching if later on down the line of the life cycle, you get most of the time more competitors and more competitors. So also about mapping out the correlation between those different drivers and see what the significance is between them is a very important part of this model to bring that all together. So if we go to the next slide. So what we wanted to do for you today is just to give you a bit of a perception on what does price sensitivity entail for Symson, right? So how do we map the model? Where should we take into consideration? And hopefully this example of a bottle of Heineken give you a bit of a understanding and a bit of perception on what it can do for you. And this was just one product and a very easy approach. So I want to bring you together through this session to some use cases where we see it being applied. Then we go into our approach. We tell you a bit about how we implement it and how do you set up the proper experiments for it. Then we go into our lessons learned, and after that, we have time for some Q&A. Okay, chapter one, use case. So what we see for use case for price sensitivity, one of those is to give you a very clear guidance in how you can execute price experiments for margin improvements. Because after we have done our analysis, there is a price sensitivity score, which we will show you a bit down the line. And based upon that sensitivity score, you can actually do some proper margin optimization. Second one is redefining your product group based on sensitivity for net price communication and discount. So think in this case, more specifically for a B2B scenario, that's am I giving the right discount to the right consumer, right? So what we see happening a lot of time is that for the full product portfolio, a customer group gets discounted. So 5%, 10%, 20%, whatever. But if you can have a very clear understanding what is the need from your customer and what is their most price sensitive products, you can actually make sure that you don't have to offer the full discount over the full portfolio, but you can give them the right product selection. That's where you need to discount upon. And the other ones you don't. So this will give you a very good understanding on, am I giving away too many discounts? Third one, defining which products are sensitive for a revenue increase. So think very specifically here about promos, more in the e-commerce perspective. If you want to know about your full product portfolio on which products you should do a promo, where are they the most effective, you basically want to know which of my products are the most sensitive. So which of these products bring most possible clients to my web shop or somewhere else, right? So those products you should put into a promo that increases your revenue, that drives traffic to your specific website or your shop. So think about Heineken to take it for example as well, right? The amount of times beer has been discounted in the supermarket because they know that's where people make their decision to go to that specific supermarket because they get their beer cheaper. But your Lay's chips and other things you want to buy together with it are priced higher than they usually are. And then you have your fourth step, and that's actually we can help you by means of price sensitivity on defining the optimal price position of your product portfolio. And this is very specifically, for example, for manufacturers, where we then can see based upon a value mapping, where should you position yourself in the market based upon price sensitivity. Okay, next slide. So if we take a broader look and a broader perspective into which products are actually suitable for price sensitivity. If you look at your full product portfolio, not all your products are suitable for price sensitivity or for competitor pricing or price elasticity or cost-based plus. So from our perspective, what we usually recommend is, of course, a mix of all different kinds of strategies in order to get the most out of your pricing strategy. And we roughly make a decision or distinction between 5 core groups. So we have a group which we call the top items or key value items, where we're going to say these items really drive the perception to your customer. And most of the times with these products, you want to have a competitive placement in the market. Maybe it's your premium brands, you want to be a bit more expensive, but you want to make sure that the bandwidth is always okay with your competitors. Or maybe it's a bit more of a commodity product where you want to be more on the cheaper side to gain those products in there. So most of the time for these 10% of your products, you pretty much want to have a competitive pricing strategy, or in a B2B, give your sales account managers the possibility of actually going into that specific area. Then we have core items, slow movers, and your own brand. If we go to core items, that are usually the products that are bought together with the top items, but are not that price sensitive, and they are great margin drivers, right? This is where you really earn your money upon. And then you have your slow movers, which is the group that products you still need to have, but they're not moving as fast as they are as the core items, but they still can be done a lot about it, in increase of margin increasement. Usually this is a bit of a group that is neglected in most of the companies because, well, it's a slow mover, it's not being pushed too much. But there is also where a lot of low-hanging fruit is, because with a proper experiment, you can actually earn some good margins on top of that. Same thing with your core items. So basically what we say, in the previous webinar, we discussed a lot of things about price elasticity, and I would strongly recommend, if you're not familiar with how that works or how Symson goes about that, to look back into a previous webinar. And what we would say is most of the core items can run into an elasticity strategy. Unless you do not have the proper data quality, then price sensitivity definitely comes in place as well. And it's also the issue with the slow movers, because most of those products don't have enough data quality to go into an elasticity strategy. We also strongly recommend using price sensitivity in that as well. And for your own brand, it really depends. Sometimes you have a very clear brand strategy and how you want to move about that specific product or that specific brand. But if it's not the case, sometimes you can actually use price elasticity or price sensitivity for these products as well. So looking into it, I would say a firm 50%, 40% of your products can be definitely suitable for price elasticity and price sensitivity. So it's a very interesting topic to further dive into. And then, of course, we still have a part which we call, and that's not part of this scope, with recommended retail pricing or advies verkoopprijzen in Dutch. So strongly advised prices by your supplier or the manufacturer that should be upheld, which is basically you can't really have a pricing strategy on top of those because you just have to follow the recommended prices. Okay, so the scope for today is really focusing on the core items, the slow moves, and their own brands, and what price sensitivity could actually do for those products. We go to the next slide. So my colleague Arjan, I already shortly introduced him in the beginning, will give you a bit more of an explanation on what is our approach and how we deal with them.
Yes, thank you for the clear introduction for this topic, Roy. It really helps to have a familiar product to explain the sensitivity drivers. Yeah, let's dive into the approach we've defined. So we came up with a 5-step approach to assess price sensitivity of your products. So we apply this approach after we've set the scope for the product, and you can use the previous slide Roy explained for selecting the articles which could be applicable for price optimization. Yeah, we have 5 steps, and in the next slides I will get you to these 5 steps by examples, what we will do during these 5 steps. So step 1 is that we select the sensitivity drivers based upon customer input. So similar to the situation where Roy just explained what drivers and what sensitivity drivers drive beer, we do the same actually for your product. So we come up with stakeholders in your organization to have a discussion with each other, what drives the price sensitivity of your product assortment. And we usually do this with a couple of products. where we take as an example and we ask different stakeholders in the organization, why is this product so sensitive? And then you can come up with a long list of drivers as a brainstorm. And what we do with this long list is that we ask the stakeholders, what is your expert judgment? So what is the relative weight and relevance you give to each driver? And it gives us a first input of all the experience in the company to assess later the sensitivity to the products. So this more qualitative approach, but it really helps also to get a consensus, but also to really understand, what is also most important to develop the model and to look for data sources. If we go to the next step, if we have the data sources, we are going to test the assumptions and also test the relevance of the expert judgment. So here we can test not only the correlations between drivers, as Roy explained, there could be relation between the product lifecycle and competition. That's something that comes up with a correlation matrix that is shown right here. So this correlation matrix, you see that the red scores, the darker the red, the higher the correlation. So the higher there is a relation between drivers. So in this example, you see there's a big relation between the price change frequency and the quantity sold. And also between the price level and the price and the price change frequency and the number of competitors. So these are relations, and you want to get the confirmation from the company that you also see this in the beginning, during the sensitivity driver interviews. So that's something to validate. In the next step, what we are doing on the next slide is that we are going to develop the model. And what you usually see during the correlation matrix is that some drivers could overlap, so that you come with a filtering, a shorter list of drivers which are in the core model. In this example, we have 6 drivers that we've developed the core model upon. And then what you get is actually a formula. It looks a bit complex, but it is actually a formula where each driver gets a certain coefficient. And this coefficient is based upon the regression, and each coefficient also gets a beta and an input. And the total sensitivity score is based upon the input of each driver multiplied by the coefficient. And that's a logical step to define price sensitivity and the mathematical formula of the drivers we've defined in the beginning. This is more the technical part. And what we're actually doing in the next step is that we put together the machine learning and the expert judgment. So as you've maybe attended previous webinars, or if you're a customer at Symson, you're probably familiar with our vision of hyperlearning. And this is where we combine machine learning together with, we call it human learning or expert learning. So this is where the things come together. So the coefficients of the machine learning, we combine with the expert judgment. And the combination, it could be 50-50% combination. That will be the total sensitivity impact score. Especially with products where we have less data for, this gives us a lot of valuable input to combine it, to have one consensus for the technology, but also from the company to measure the total sensitivity. And later in the process, when there's more data involved, we can put higher weight to the machine learning if that's preferred. So what we do then is that we just run the model across all products you selected for the scope of the sensitivity pricing algorithm, and then you get an output. So your whole assortment can get assessed for what is the price sensitivity score. In this case, it's a plot on the products that are sold on Amazon, and you see here on the left side the products below, above 0 are the least sensitive products. And on the total right side, you see the products that have the lowest score, so -4, -5, and they have the highest price sensitivity. So minus means that it's very sensitive, and plus means that it's less sensitive. And you can create a plot like this. That's what we're doing, and all products get a price sensitivity score. And on the next slide, you see an example. So we validate the coefficients, but also the outcomes based upon a lot of products to really understand how the model behaves and how it comes to the logic of the sensitivity. So in this case, this product is sensitive. It has a minus score, and you see it's a plate, and this plate that has a price. It has a certain order in the basket size. It is an product attribute that is fast mover or slow mover. It has an A brand or private label. It has had a couple of price changes in the past, and it has a couple of competitors in the market. And each of these drivers, they have a certain coefficient, and the input on the coefficient is determined by the categorization of the data. That is also a very important step in the process. I'm not going too specific in this because it's a bit more technical, but the sum of the price sensitivity score is actually the sum of all the input times the coefficient, and that gives you the end score of the price sensitivity with the formula we've developed. So with our tool, with our model, we can assess all products based upon price sensitivity. But our lessons learned, we dive into that later. It's also that you make the interpretation of these products explainable to the stakeholders in the organization, and also how the model came to this price sensitivity score. So in our interface, we provide you with insights. Each product you've uploaded into Symson could get a price sensitivity score, and we offer you also a heat map and spider charts to explain and to make clear what are the main drivers for this product, and in this case, what leads to the price sensitivity. What's always a nice exercise to do with the company is to visualize the top 5 most sensitive products and the top 5 least sensitive products. And what you see here is on the vertical axis, you see your product codes, and on the horizontal axis, you see the drivers. And it gives a nice overview of the contradiction between the most sensitives and the least sensitives, where you see they're behaving totally different. The greens means that there's a positive relation, and the red means that there's a clear negative relation. And this makes it very powerful to understand the logic of the model, and also to have the confirmation from the company to understand the logic, and to also confirm that they also see this price sensitiveness in the products and in the sales. Yeah, an important step also in the whole development is that you plot the model and assess the right price sensitivity scores on the right dimension. So also in our previous webinar on price sensitivity, and also in general in your price process, it could be that you have different customer behavior in different markets, in different channels, or in different countries. So also with price sensitivity, it's good to be aware, if you already know that beforehand, if you have a different price sensitivity per channel, that you also plot the model on a different dimension, in this case, the channel. So what you see here, one of the projects we run for our customers, is that we see for the same assortment, for the same portfolio, we have a totally different price sensitivity based on the platform. So you see here Amazon as a channel has way more price sensitive customers than Otto. Otto is a German marketplace, just like Amazon, only a little bit smaller. But you see here that there's a clear difference, and that's good to realize, because you cannot run the same experiment based upon these insights. So when we have all price sensitivity score from products, the next step is, of course, that you are going to put this into practice and that you are going to execute based upon these price sensitivity scores. And as already showed in one of the previous slides, that the minus scores of the products have a very sensitive outcome, and the plus scores have an insensitive outcome. And that's also what we are doing. We make buckets of groups, buckets of products, and then we ask to the company, okay, what level of price change would you like to experiment with? And for the most price sensitive products, we choose for a discount. This can be -4%, can be -2%, depending on how aggressive the company wants to act based upon this price sensitivity. And for the insensitive products, we choose for a markup. And also this markup is based upon how aggressive would you have this experiment. It's really important to measure the change in volume after the experiment, but to also measure the sensitivity and to continuously optimize this based upon new data. So this is a 5-step approach, how we can come from actually no model to a model that can predict the price sensitivity of each product. And as I already said, is a continuous approach. So it actually doesn't end after step 5, but we get smarter also after these experiments. So this is a continuous approach and a way of, we call it hyperlearning your company. The next chapter is about how to implement it and to set up a good experiment. So as already said, we divide products, all the products that has sensitivity score, into buckets. And in this case, we have 8 different buckets, and these buckets are connected to a price change. So as already said, in this case, the very sensitive buckets get the highest discount, and the very insensitive bucket gets the highest markup. And in between, we have some other percentages to test also the bit more moderate scores. So we split that into groups. We also usually have a control group, and this control group could be another channel, could be a split in customers, or could be a split in products, depending on the environment of what is possible for the specific customer. So this could be an outcome for B2B and B2C. So what we do for B2B companies is those buckets could be 8 or 16 buckets. We divide all the products of the assortment, which is applicable for sensitivity, into different buckets. And we define what could be a better net price based upon the price sensitivity. So we take the current net price and we say, okay, it should be increased or decreased based upon the sensitivity. And of course, the most sensitive products get a discount, and the least sensitive products get a markup. And it's also really interesting to see also for the company for which products the willingness to pay is higher than for others. So for which products can we let go a little bit the cost, and can we price more on the price sensitivity of each product. For B2C, promo management is a big thing. So therefore, price sensitivity can be used for promos. The very sensitive group of products can be used for effective promos. And for the very insensitive products, you could leave margin, or you could leave money on the table if you're doing these kind of products into promotion, because they could be less effective. Of course, you can experiment with it, but based upon data, we can give you a suggestion and a recommendation which products are really beneficial for promotions, to drive traffic or to increase revenue or to increase the total share of wallet of a customer. So as price sensitivity is also a kind of an experimental approach, especially in the beginning. It's really important that you have a good idea how you can design an experiment. We also discussed it in a previous webinar, but since price sensitivity is a kind of a similar approach, It's really important to have this 5-step approach of how to design an experiment. So we usually start with a good objective. And that objective is often smart and measurable. So it could be, say, okay, I want to increase a certain percentage in margin, and that's the measurement and the objective we are working with during the experiment. And the second step you take is that we split the data. So if we have the scope of the product of sensitivity defined, we want to split the data into a test and control group. And as I already mentioned earlier, this could be on a product level or channel level or on a customer level. But you want to have an honest and a fair experiment to avoid a situation that if the margin has been increased from the experiment, you want to test that it's not only because of the experiment, but it can also be because of other factors. If you haven't had a good test and control group, it's really hard to have a good benchmark if if it really a consequence and an effect on the experiment, or if it was driven by, for example, an overall margin increase of the market. So that's very important. Step 3 is that make sure it's unbiased. So referring to the example of the platform sensitivity of Otto and Amazon, if you know this already beforehand, it's really biased if you do the same experiment with the same expectations on these two platforms. So if you know it already beforehand, if you know that the Amazon customers are way more price sensitive, then also the expectations should be different, and also the setup of the experiment should be different. Step 4, to find the right timeline. Within our applications in B2B and B2C, we see that different timelines are applicable for good experiments. So for example, with B2C, going to the Amazon example, you can already see effective results to evaluate an experiment after 1 week. But for B2B, it could take a bit longer. So it could take a quarter or maybe half a year to really evaluate the impact of an experiment. So going to step 5, evaluate the right way. And then actually following the steps we did in the previous steps, what was the objective? Did we achieve this objective in the test group? What was actually the outcome of the control group? What is the difference? Because this is how we can validate and evaluate the effectiveness of the experiment. And we want to learn from products that were behaving according to expectation and from products that were behaving not according to the expectation. And that's where we want to learn from it. And this is also kind of a continuous process because all the products that didn't behave according to the expectation, maybe we can improve the model with an extra driver, or maybe we have to adjust the weights of the coefficients. So this is the whole process we walk together with you if you are working with price sensitivity. We can skip this slide. I will give the floor to Roy again to discuss the lessons learned.
Thank you, Arjan, for the explanation on how we do price sensitivity and also a lot about the science behind it. Let me take you through a bit about what are our lessons learned. And in order to start with that, I would like to tell you a bit more about the different maturity stages we see that a company needs in order for the different price strategies to be fully enabled. And we've divided them in 5 steps. 3 and 4 can be a discussion about. You can intertwine those depending on your industry and the level you're in. But for the sake for today's webinar, I've put it like this. And basically, the first maturity level is most of the time a cost-based plus or a margin markup strategy where you're really looking, what's my cost of my product? I want to have a minimum margin or a markup, and that's my selling price, which is mostly done via Excel or can even be done via an ERP system, but it's not a very sophisticated way of doing it. But at least you make sure you always have a margin target and you're okay to deal with that. Then we have the second step. And at some point, you want to take into account what is my competitive field doing, right? So what's happening in the market, trying to get that data in and to evaluate which price position you're doing, and getting the best results for your different products. And after that, we go into three, and that's a value-based pricing approach. And that means a whole different way of thinking about pricing, because then you're looking into where do we add value. So what's the value added of our specific product or service, and how can we monetize upon that? That's a pretty extensive process to go through. And it really shows you, and in the end, you get a value map where you see, okay, so this is where we're adding value, and how can you then monetize upon those values, and what's the percentage of the total pie you actually can take, and what's still able to sell properly. And then you have four, and that's the rule-based automation pricing. And that's when we talked about really about price automation. So that's basically your cost-based plus strategy, or your competitor information, everything, all that information that comes in, or your value mapping. You've determined that your proposition is that you can always be 2% more expensive than your direct competitor, but not more expensive than another competitor, etc. Right? You automate that full process into business logic, where you can say, if this, then that, and you can make a whole automation tree out of that, and you can build your strategies on top of that. You link that with your ERP system or your PIM system, which basically means that your day-to-day operational pricing is automated, and you don't have to look around it, and it's just more about how to set the right strategy. We call that rule-based automation pricing. But on top of that, you also want to go to AI-based pricing. So basically, that's the fifth step. And then we're talking more about price sensitivity and algorithm-based pricing and price elasticity, where we take into account more data, when we let the algorithm learn from itself, where we think about what are the drivers, how to impact those. And in order to do that, it means there is a broader data set necessary, but also there is a certain maturity of the data set necessary. One of the things, for example, we see happening many, many times is that in the B2B industry, a lot of salespeople just can do the deal, right? They do whatever they have to do to close it. So there is no real fixed way of doing it. So if your pricing is all over the place, it's very difficult for models, because then you first have to normalize it. You have to take some things into consideration before you can actually do a proper analysis on top of that. So if you already have price automation before that, it means you have, in a very organized way, you get the data in, and then you can do some proper analysis on top of that. So most of the companies are in step 1 or 2, some more are in 3. And then what I say, it's value-based pricing, rule-based automation can also be done on cost-based and competitors. So we see that happening a lot, specifically in the e-commerce industry, for example. So a lot of people have that in place, but not for the full portfolio, and not with, it's more about, when we talk then about the race to the bottom, right? So we just want to be the cheapest, and you keep on decreasing your prices without looking into what's your own transactional data and how to utilize on that. And then we have the step 5. So let me tell you a bit about then the lessons learned when we talk about price sensitivity, and how we want to, and what we've come across when we were implementing. And I think we started off with an exercise about determining the drivers for products. The interesting part is that with the workshops we have done, it's extremely important to have the right stakeholders at the table, because sales and marketing most of the time have a completely different perspective on what's driving the price, or finance, or the CEO. So making sure that everybody, all the right stakeholders are there to tell them, and to go through and to have this exercise on what should be a price driver, and also the weighing. So all together determine at the end, so what should be the weighing of, let's say, brand or quality of the product, or etc. And determining that together makes it, first of all, for the implementation, a lot easier for everybody to accept the outcome of the sensitivity model, because everybody has been involved, and everybody has been able to do his or her say, and is taken into consideration. And also you get a broader perspective on how the company perceives your product. And that's also a very interesting exercise actually to do, because you will see, because with all the companies so far we have seen it, it's completely different in what people perceive as the main drivers for the price. Then the second one is, as Arjan already explained before, you need to have the proper tools and mindset to evaluate those performance, because it's not just a one-off exercise. It's something you want to re-evaluate over a specific period of time. So you can create the model, but maybe the weights over time do differ and do change. You need to be able and capable to analyze these. You need to be able to also understand, if I change my price, what's actually going to be the impact. So most companies don't have proper analysis reporting in place to measure these things. So it's Power BI or Tableau, or even in Excel, you can make rather easily reports on top of that to measure the price changes. And that's a mindset that needs to be there, that it's okay as long as you do it with small steps. That's the next point. But as long as you do it with small steps, and you can oversee the impact of it, it's okay to look into what is now the right price point. So it's okay to do those experiments, and it's okay to fail an experiment as well. Because if you fail the experiment, you learn from it. You understand that you priced too high, or that you priced too low. But in order to do that, you need to have the proper tools and mindset, and you need to have the learning loops in place. So also start small, as I just said. Don't go with your full product portfolio in there. Start with a specific brand. Start with a specific order part to go through that. And then also you need to make sure that there are some proper guardrails in place. So we want to make sure that by means of elasticity and by means of sensitivity, it are still mathematical approaches, right? And we take into account, of course, the expertise of the local area, but also from your salespeople. But still, it's a mathematical approach, and it's looking at historical data. So in order to make sure that it's not doing very wild things, you want to make sure that you cap it at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10%, depending on what you feel comfortable with, to make sure it's always within a bandwidth where it's operating. And also on the last part, which is a very important one, is that there should be executive level buy-in, because we're talking about price sensitivity in this case, which is a very innovative way of dealing with your pricing. And that means that people need to be able to understand that, and that also needs to be fostered by the executive level, because you need to have that drive through buy-in in order for everybody to get on board, because it's new, it is change, things will change within the company. So you need executive level buy-in in order to get this through to everybody and make sure it's company-wide led. So this is it with regards to the lessons learned. I've just been informed, unfortunately, that we do have some technical issues, so I'm not 100% sure if there are any questions and if they will come through, but we can give it a try. So I would like to ask, for example, if you're on YouTube, I understand there are some issues with LinkedIn, but if you are on YouTube, you can ask your questions to us, and we will answer them. And if we see that there are no questions showing up, we also will have the alternative later on. We would do a follow-up. We will give you a call, and you can definitely ask them. Or otherwise, you can always send your questions to my contact details, which is roy@symson.com. Okay, let's give it a few seconds, Arjan, to see if things are happening. We have a question popping up. As an e-commerce company, can I use the sensitivity model to find out which products in my portfolio can be used to drive the most impact with regards to promotions? Arjan, I think you kind of touched base on that already at the beginning of the presentation. Could you answer this one?
Yeah, so let me read the question first. Yeah, the answer is yes. That's the short answer. Yeah, what we've discussed in the presentation is that we can divide all the products you've assigned to this model into buckets. So we can give you an overview of which products really could drive the most effectiveness, so the most quantity increase within promotion, and which one are less effective. So definitely, this is one of the use cases you can use. So yeah, and would like to get in touch with you to give more information how you can apply this model.
Yeah, to maybe to elaborate it from my side of things, we have a client who's actually making use of this, also in a way of that they're looking into. So if they have a specific brand, or some specific brand actually, and they want to see which product in that brand is the most price sensitive to actually push out in a promotion to drive the traffic. So it's an A brand, they have multiple products in there, and they are checking within that product which is the most sensitive one in order to push that one out to generate the traffic. So yes, it can be done. Let's see, do we have more questions? Does this model allow us to determine what is the most important driver for price sensitivity? Arjan?
Yeah, I like these yes or no questions. Also here, the answer is yes. I think one of the interesting things we see, especially in B2B, that you have a lot of discussions from sales that for some product the competition is most important, or for some is the brand most important. So I think the price sensitivity model offers a great tool to make this more data driven, proven by data, and that you can really validate these gut feelings with a model, to see what's the most important driver. So yeah, the answer is yes for this one as well, and this is a perfect application of the sensitivity model to help you in the discussions internally. What could be the most important driver?
Can price sensitivity also be used for rethinking or discount structure in a B2B setting? Well, yes, that's they are good questions today. Yes and no, but yes, definitely, it can be done. Because you're looking at price sensitivity and kind of as the example I said earlier during the webinar is that what we see happening a lot of times in a B2B setting is it's just the basic gold, silver, bronze way of pricing with fixed discounts on the full portfolio. And this is not necessarily needed. So where the price sensitivity model can be used is on a customer group specific way. We can analyze on the transactional data where the client is most or the group is most sensitive about. So you know these products to give in a bit of a lower price. So have your regular discount, let's say the 5%. And for the products around it, you can put that on 4 or 3%, which already gains you, of course, the 1 to 2% margin. And this, if you do this over your full portfolio, so let's say a carpenter and a hammer is his main thing, but a painting is not necessarily his main part where he's coming for you to do his purchases. So, but if he's buying his hammer, he might also wants to buy the paint, right? So why should you give the 5% discount on the paint as well, where he's already coming for the hammer? So this gives you the option to make differentiations and to make more decisions on discounts per customer group. Actually. Oh, there were a lot of prices coming or a lot of questions going in too fast.
Boss, the question is, do you have cross elasticities between products? It depends a little bit on how you, yeah, from what context you're asking this question. Um, yeah, I think a lot of products could have cross elasticities. That's of course something to be aware of. In the previous webinar, we discussed this topic, elasticity and cross elasticity. But of course, yeah, you and also in terms of sensitivity, you could have products that are related to each other, and to some extent, the price sensitivity model covers that, because we try to group products with the same sensitivity, and with elasticity, yeah, you're looking more at an individual product basis. So need a little bit more context to um, answer your question the right way. But yeah, the short answer is yes. Maybe Roy, do you have?
No, yeah, that's what I wanted to say as well. So I can see, yes, there is cross elasticity between products, and yes, it's been accounted for in the model. The question is, depending on how do you want to account for it in the model, we can make adjustments towards it. So yes, we are aware of the cross elasticities. Yes, they happen, and yes, they are taken care of in the model. Okay, more questions? I saw a few of those pop by very quickly. I'm not sure if our moderator could put one of the previous ones that was already passed, which we didn't answer. Okay.
No more questions. No.
No, we have no more questions. So then I would like to thank everybody very much for participating in this session. As I said, I hope we've answered all your questions and gave you a bit of an insight in how we deal with price sensitivity and the lessons learned from our side about it. Yeah, we're looking forward to stay in touch with you. We'll do a reach out somewhere this week or next week. Just to see if you have any feedback for us regarding this presentation, but also if this is something that might be or might not be applicable for you. So yeah, thank you for your time.
See you later. Have a great day.